Hello, welcome to this Escape Collective podcast special on our latest investigative piece, Skyfall, the inside story of Ineos Grenadiers' decline. My name's Johnny Long. I co-wrote this exclusive story you're about to hear with one of our regular contributors, Chris Marshall-Bell, as well as my colleague, Ronan McLaughlin. And to give everyone their proper credit, as they deserve, Joe Lindsay was the adult in the editing room, making sure everything was buttoned up and proper. Okay, now how this is going to work is I'm just going to read the story out for you, for those who prefer podcast articles. And if you're listening to this on a free podcast feed, then it's going to cut off about halfway through, so you need to sign up and become a member at escapecollective.com/join to get the full access to this story, as well as all of the other great coverage we have on our site. As well as this episode, we're also going to follow it up with a bit of a roundtable discussion expanding on what's going on at Ineos. Bring you some tidbits we didn't get into the published article, and also bring you some behind the scenes reporting with some extra insight on, maybe stuff that didn't quite fit in, a proper published, polished thing. So here we go. After speaking to a dozen team insiders who told us what's gone wrong for cycling's once dominant team, this is Skyfall, the inside story of Ineos Grenadiers' decline. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. In just 3 years, the Ineos Grenadiers, cycling's most dominant team, transformed from an innovative powerhouse into a rudderless corporation, haemorrhaging talent and results despite its massive budget. To dissect this empire's collapse, Escape Collective spoke with more than a dozen sources in and around Ineos, former riders and staff, agents, and other well-connected people in pro cycling, to learn what took the team from winning 7 tours in 8 seasons to struggling to hold on to talent both on and off the bike. The dividing line between the team's old Grand Tours conquering era and its new scrappier self is difficult to pinpoint. Perhaps it was the upheaval of the pandemic-scrambled 2020 season, or its 2021 sequel, which saw the emergence of Tadej Pogačar and Jonas Vingegaard, and the rising juggernauts of UAE Team Emirates and Jumbo-Visma overthrow Ineos' previously untroubled hegemony. Or maybe it was Egan Bernal's 2021 Giro d'Italia win, Ineos' last Grand Tour victory, and one that came in a much different style to the controlling, mountain train style victories of its 2010s heyday. Another good place to start is Bernal's life-threatening crash that next off-season. But you can make an argument that Ineos' current era truly began later, with its 2022 plan to branch out and take their Grand Tour dominance to the cobbled classics. Spring had always played second fiddle to the team's yellow jersey obsession. But with Bernal facing a long recovery and Ineos suddenly bereft of a single Grand Tour leader, Post-Roubaix offered what looked to be a watershed moment. Team founder and mastermind Dave Brailsford, not as omnipresent at races as he once was due to various health problems, stood defiantly and victoriously just past the finish line in the velodrome, hands aloft to welcome his rider Dylan van Baarle home.
Around turn 4, into the home straight, and Dylan van Baarle can see the finish line. Solo, on his own, the job done. Dylan van Baarle, it's all yours. The famous old concrete track belonging to Dylan van Baarle, and for the first time in their history, to the Ineos Grenadiers. Dylan van Baarle wins the fastest ever edition of Paris-Roubaix. And finally, Dave Brailsford can celebrate.
This came just a week after the Grand Tour Super Domestique Michał Kwiatkowski won Amstel Gold Race. Standing trackside that day, there was the sense that spring had sprung for a team that risked being left behind. After 3 years of turmoil and setback, the ownership change in 2019, the crash-induced decline of Chris Froome, the health issues of its charismatic chef de mission, the shocking death of beloved lead sports director Nicolas Portal, the keystone and heart of the team, the fallout from the Richard Freeman scandal that saw its former team doctor lose his medical licence and get a 4-year anti-doping ban for ordering illegal substances knowing or believing they were for Sky or British cycling riders, the eruption of the Pogačar-Vingegaard era, and the serious injury to Bernal, Ineos looked to have righted the ship and be weathering everything that was being thrown at them. But since that day in the Roubaix velodrome, the results sheet speaks for itself. 0 Grand Tour victories, 0 monuments, and of the week-long stage races, only victories at the Tour de Suisse and the Tour de Romandie, when previously the likes of Paris-Nice and the Critérium de Dauphiné used to be won as warm-ups for the Tour. If 2023 was shaky, it at least saw 38 wins, including 2 stages of the Tour de France. But then 2024 hit, and the victory total dropped to 14, the lowest in its history. Tom Pidcock, the team's highest paid rider and highest profile rider, was openly agitated, and not so openly agitating, for an exit, a move which looked close in October but ultimately fell through. Staff turnover continues, with lead sports director Steve Cummings and highly regarded performance engineer Dan Bigham out the door, the latter publicly lamenting the lack of focus on his area of expertise. Criticism bubbled up publicly from the team's longest tenured riders, Geraint Thomas and Luke Rowe. Even quiet, homegrown talents like Ethan Hayter described a tricky year with a team that could do with a couple of changes as he exited the squad. Hayter's mild critique undersells the state of Ineos. The team today is a shadow of its former self. All of the smart people have left, a former staff member told Escape Collective when asked to reflect on what has changed within the team. Things were alright with Sky, one former rider added, but with Ineos there is too much structure, compliance and acting like a big corporation. The team's go-getting, question-everything approach to all aspects of bike racing, from sports science to tactics, has been replaced by a cautious corporatist ethos and calcified decision-making. That culture, and its erratic approach to top talent, has led to an exodus of top riders and key staff, and alienated some still on the team, like Pidcock. Ineos is still richly funded, but scattered and ineffective. Its billionaire owner Jim Ratcliffe dissatisfied at both its underperformance and being eclipsed by the sport's newest wave of top teams, as well as distracted by his newer ventures, chiefly his new controlling stake in Manchester United. Many of the people we spoke to did so on condition of anonymity due to legal and professional concerns, but the picture that emerges is clear. A tale of internal politics, power vacuums, mismanagement and ego, of a sporting force reduced to a billionaire's lethargic plaything. This is the story of Skyfall. (2022 to 2023), the empire fades. After the seismic events of Portal's death and increased suspicion sowed by the Freeman scandal, we can also trace a few key changes in backroom staff during the 2021 to 2022 winter period that sowed the seeds for the team's precipitous fall in 2024. The return of longtime coach Rod Ellingworth the year prior was fully explained when Brailsford was sucked higher up into the Ineos machine to oversee Ratcliffe's sprawling and underperforming empire, the Mercedes-AMG Formula One team, Britannia Sailing, French football club OGC Nice, the All Blacks rugby squad, as well as the Ineos Grenadiers cycling outfit, of course. However, Brailsford still officially remained as team principal, with Ellingworth given the title of deputy. While many people we spoke to point to the absence of Brailsford as being a reason for the downturn, one former staffer points out the decline began when the team's founder was still at the helm. In fact, he still is. There's this huge thing about Dave stepping away from the team and things going to shit, one source said, but that trajectory had already started and he hasn't actually stepped away at all. In that 2021 to 2022 off-season, another key figure, Tim Kerrison, the mastermind coach behind the team's most successful era, also left after 12 seasons. On the road, results continued to trickle in. Pidcock and Carlos Rodriguez shone to the extent that both secured lucrative new deals as other suitors circled. Pidcock's new contract came after just 1 year with the team and was signed in the weeks after Bernal's crash in 2022. The 5-year deal, numerous sources confirmed, is in the €3 to €5 million range, making him the highest paid rider in the team, and within the top 5 or even 3 biggest earners in the entire peloton. This bumper contract would have required sign-off from Brailsford. Even before Rodriguez signed his own 4-year extension in October 2023, there were tensions with Pidcock, and the team proved inept at managing a precocious and sometimes petulant talent in whom they'd invested significantly. A scene from Season 2 of Netflix's Unchained, filmed at that year's Tour de France, thrust those strains into the open. In the scene, Pidcock and Cummings, his sports director, talk about what the team's strategy should be for the coming mountain stage. The logical thing is that I ride for Carlos, but I'm not riding on a flat bit killing myself and getting dropped, Pidcock answers matter-of-factly when Cummings asks what he should do, given that Rodriguez is a minute ahead of him on GC with only a week left to race. Cummings then tests the waters. I think we have to commit to Carlos. Do you agree? I'm not sure, to be honest, answers Pidcock. What are you not sure about, inquires Cummings. Can you turn the cameras off, please? Pidcock requests, not wanting whatever was said next to make it into the public realm. Normally, it would have fallen to Ellingworth to handle the riders' roles and hierarchy. As he noted in the same episode, managing riders' egos and personalities is part of the job, and Ellingworth has particular experience and skill in that role, having been a steady hand behind similarly precocious British talents such as Mark Cavendish. In many ways, Ellingworth represented a steady continuation of Brailsford's leadership. But Ellingworth neither had full decision-making power due to Brailsford's position above him in the org chart, nor was a leader of the same inspirational ilk. A key component of Brailsford's success, a recent employee explained, was his charisma and attention to creating a solid culture, while also being able to come up with clever ideas and knowing how to put together a plan and execute it with the right people in place. That staffer viewed Ellingworth as less of a visionary, lacking Brailsford's level of understanding of the sport from a performance perspective. In the staffer's words, Ellingworth was trying to be Dave because Dave wasn't there. He really just tried to do similar things but failed pretty miserably. Sports science was a particular area of concern. Brailsford admitted in late 2020 that his team had continued to work with their heads down, but didn't notice other teams were overtaking them. Yet sources tell of instances as late as 2022 when it felt normal to hear staff say, "This is how we did things in 2014," or "We did this during the Sky era." That thread apparently ran all the way up to management, as Ellingworth didn't look to break with the past. Predominantly, Rod set the tone, and he was taking leave from what Dave had always historically done, the staffer said. Ironically, working under these preconceived notions of what Brailsford would do set a stark departure from the question-everything, marginal gain-focused approach that had helped birth the original success of the Sky era. In elite sport, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. There is another reading of the situation. 2 former employees told Escape that they believe Ellingworth was set up to fail. Brailsford had been promoted to run all of Ineos' varied sporting ventures, but he remained as team principal. Ellingworth was tasked with the day-to-day running of the team, but required a sign-off from Brailsford for most major decisions, according to one of those employees. Even minor issues got bottlenecked, they said, noting an instance at the 2023 Tour de France, where getting a team vehicle sent in to replace a broken one was a decision that had to be passed up the chain. One person told us Ellingworth told some riders they were being signed, before Brailsford then blocked the deals at the last minute, leaving Ellingworth with the fun task of having to tell those riders the bad news. Ellingworth grew increasingly irate with the complicated structures at Ineos. He was totally frustrated and burned out by the decision-making process, a well-connected former colleague of Ellingworth said. Things were supposedly in his hands, but they never were in reality, and he couldn't get decisions out of people like Dave Brailsford. Ellingworth couldn't get through to Dave, and in the end, enough was enough, and he left because he couldn't get decisions ratified, another who's known both men for years added. The problem is there are too many layers of management for decisions to be taken quickly enough. He decided he needed to get out because he stopped enjoying it, and they were also starting to put the blame on him for things that weren't his doing. In November, after the 2023 season had finished with a modest haul of victories, including 2 more Tour de France stages, Ellingworth resigned from the team for a second time, news called gutting and sad by team stalwart Geraint Thomas. At first, Ellingworth refused to be drawn on his departure, but after taking a role at British Cycling in March to become the race director of the men's and women's Tour of Britain, he would later announce a return to Bahrain Victorious, the World Tour team he originally left Ineos in 2019 to join. He told journalists he resigned because, "I just decided that it was time for me to finish. There were things that I wasn't totally in agreement with, and then I felt like life was catching up with me a little bit." According to multiple sources, it's common practice for employees to sign a non-disclosure statement when they leave the team. Past that brief statement, Ellingworth hasn't publicly expanded on his exit. He did not respond to multiple requests for comment for this story. Certainly by the time of Ellingworth's departure, if not before, there was widespread bafflement and even anger at the way in which Brailsford had distanced himself from the team as he sought out new adventures in football and failed to bring in the words of one person we spoke to, someone competent enough to be his successor. What they're left with is a huge leadership vacuum, and it's amazing how things have got so bad so quickly. The aforementioned former colleague of Ellingworth corroborated. The basic problem has been that Dave lost interest, time, and commitment 3 years ago, and that inhibited recruitment, budget issues, and the decision-making, and it's why they've lost some key riders who they should have kept. A look at some of the riders, both experienced and young upstarts, who have left since 2022, and the teams to which they've gone, paints this picture vividly. Adam Yates, Pavel Sivakov, and Jonathan Narvaez, all gone to UAE, Richard Carapaz to EF, Dylan Van Baarle and Ben Tullett to Visma Lease Bike, Theo Gegenhardt, Lidl Trek, Danny Martinez to Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, and Ethan Hayter to Soudal Quickstep. When you look at the guys who've gone out and the guys who've come in, there is a big difference. That is no surprise, said Geraint Thomas in an episode of his What's Occurring podcast aired in September 2024, who has been with the team since its first season. He added, "That base in the team is a lot more fragile than what it used to be." January 2024 to present. The Great Unraveling. At last addressing the leadership confusion that had been created, Brailsford formally stepped down as Ineos Grenadiers team principal in January 2024 to focus more heavily on Manchester United Football Club. In both financial heft and struggles, this late in sporting acquisition of Ratcliffe's dwarfed those of the cycling team. Maybe Brailsford was half hoping for another stint living in a camper van in the car park of a football stadium, as he did with Ratcliffe's OGC Nice in October 2022, to fully dial in on turning around that club's fortunes. A replacement for the cycling team was found in the shape of new CEO John Allott, who, after spending 2 years as the team's managing director, largely focused on the business side of the organisation, would now oversee every aspect of the day-to-day running of the team. Similarly, former Sky rider turned sports director Steve Cummings was promoted to head of racing, while Scott Draw was rehired back to the team as performance director, away from his position as director of sport at elite British private school Millfield. The new Ineos was often all about trying to replicate the old Ineos, which meant a lot of culture meetings. At one of these meetings in early 2024, according to an employee who was present, Allott told the Ineos Grenadiers he wanted them to think of themselves as a tribe, where everyone's job was to protect the tribe, and if you didn't, you'd be kicked out. During this meeting, said the source, Tom Pidcock raised his hand and said something along the lines of, "So you're saying if we don't fall in line, we get booted out?" To which Allott replied, "Yes." "Well, that's shit," was Pidcock's reaction, the employee recalled. Another source with deep knowledge of the team corroborated the events, but said that Allott's presentation was instead a 40-minute monologue where he told the team it had not been performing to standards. Pidcock, the source said, was the only one to stand up and back the riders and staff from what he viewed as unfair criticism, which drew respect from a lot of the team. This interaction set the stage for a relationship that made headlines throughout the season, as Pidcock tested Allott's proclamation and, in general, got his way. Cycling is, fundamentally, an individual sport competed in by teams. That tension underlies much of what Ineos went through this year. As the previously mentioned long-time associate of the team told Escape, Ineos have set up an athlete-centred and driven system which gives all power to riders. So, when they tell Tom he has to go to this training camp or complete the tour, he turns round and says no. He wants to concentrate on winning gold at Paris, so will do it the way he wants. They don't have control over Tom. The lack of control over their 25-year-old star extended to Pidcock's absence from their pre-tour training camp on Teide, with the Brit instead opting to stay in Andorra to prepare for the Grand Tour alone, where he could also focus on quietly getting ready for the Olympic mountain bike race. The source who corroborated the Allott presentation said this plan to stay in Andorra was agreed between team and rider, but he was the only member of the tour team not to join the camp on Teide. The team has tried to accommodate Pidcock's quirks, at least publicly. "He's obsessed with winning. He's a winner," Cummings told the Netflix cameras. "You do need that ruthless streak. It's just how we, as a team, manage that." Ellingworth concurred. "With a character like Tom, you can sit them down and tell them, this is the path. But you're not going to change him, so you've just got to work with him in a different way. But quite often, the legs will do the talking." Heading into the 2024 Tour de France, the question dogging the team was not how Pidcock would fare this time around, or how he would slot into a tour team that also contained tour winners Bernal and Thomas and rising star Rodriguez. On the lips of pundits and fans was a far simpler query. Where was Steve Cummings? The head of racing was missing from his usual spot in the team's Tour de France race car. Ineos said he would be supporting Zach Dempster, another DS, and the team remotely. But Escape was told by one person close to Cummings that the sports director's day-to-day role at the Tour was limited at best. Indeed, during the Wednesday of the final week of the race, he decamped to southern Italy in his camper van for the extended holiday he usually takes post-tour. He was subsequently not present at the Deutschland Tour, despite being on the initial list of attending sports directors. In fact, he had not worked at a race since June's Criterium du Dauphiné. Officially, the word was Cummings had not been suspended nor placed on gardening leave, and multiple sources say the Briton was none the wiser to his current status nor his future. They just told him that he can't go to the Tour without enlightening him or anyone else, the source close to Cummings said. It stinks and it's toxic. In early November 2024, Cummings announced on his LinkedIn that he had left the team. Ineos made no public statement about the move. One theory was posited. Cummings may have irritated team management with his combative response to a Road.cc journalist at the Criterium du Dauphiné in June, when the reporter took videos of the new Pinarello Dogma, a reaction which gives off the impression of a staff on the brink. Patar reporting points to a much more likely explanation for his benching, and then departure less than a year after assuming the lead director role. That is a severe breakdown in trust, cooperation, and communication with Pidcock. Cummings was dispensed of his tour role just a week after the Netflix Unchained episode highlighted the tension between the pair at the 2023 edition. On the eve of the 2024 tour's start, when Cycling Weekly asked Pidcock how Cummings' absence would affect the race, he responded, "Better. I don't think it will have an impact. Things change. It's not really for me to comment." The root cause of the fractured relationship, according to one source, is that Pidcock had taken umbrage to Cummings telling him he was never going to be a Tour de France winner as long as he didn't dedicate his life to the road. Steve tried to bring him back into line, but it backfired, and as a consequence, it's Steve who's paying for it, they said. Ultimately, Pidcock doesn't like Cummings, and Cummings doesn't like Pidcock. Pidcock won that round, but tensions finally came to a head 2 days before Il Lombardia, which was supposed to be his last road race of the season. Instead, the 25-year-old announced less than 48 hours before the start that he had been deselected for the race. In a post on Instagram that sounded equally hurt and puzzled, he said he was in great shape and looking forward to leading the team at the final monument of the season. Further details were not immediately forthcoming, with sports director Zach Dempster telling Cycling News in Italy it was a management decision on the final team. That's their right. Whether Dempster knew more or not, that's not exactly an explanation, which one Ineos senior staff member says contributes to the ongoing public fascination with what's actually going on behind closed doors. "I can only say that if I make a decision, I inform people about my reasoning," they said. "In every decision I make, I would say why I made that decision, and I would give information as to why I made a certain decision to the people involved and the people around. They need to know why. That's not happening." The evening of the Lombardia announcement, multiple journalists began to hear whispers that Pidcock had been sacked by Ineos Grenadiers, a rumour dismissed by his agent at the time. The next week, there was a huge push from Q36.5 to bring Pidcock into the fold. But any potential deal fell through and, for now at least, Pidcock looks set to remain an Ineos Grenadier, with 3 years left to run on his contract. I'm very sorry, but for those of you listening on the free feed, and if you can hear this, then that's you, then that's all you're getting. If you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, the solution is simple. Please go to escapecollective.com/join and sign up to become a member, because that's what funds the work we do. All of our revenue is from our members, which helps us remain independent and bring you stories such as these. Even though we're probably now off Jim Ratcliffe's Christmas card list, it's a business model we think brings you the best possible media that you also deserve.